That's better. It's probably working now. Okay, so Judges 19 through 20, beginning of 20. Call this one the events that lead to civil war. We left off with a man was traveling with his concubine back from Judea, and he ended up needing to sleep overnight. And he ended up in the area near Jerusalem, uh, and a man that was going to help him out. So that's where we left off. And I left off in a place where everything seemed kind of normal. It's a practice that in that particular time period in that country, when travelers needed a place to stay, that especially within the Jewish tribes, and that they were supposed to put one another up and help each other out by giving them places to stay. So that's what this man did. When he found out that they were both from Mount Ephraim area, and so that's where we left off. This man was going to put up him and his concubine and his donkey for the evening. And so we left off. I remember I was having some trouble with one of the verses, which is verse 18. So we're going to begin there, even though I got verse 22 down here. I just wanted to review that section because I found a good explanation of what I wasn't sure about that verse when we talked about it on last week. So let's start with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, oh Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity, and help me, Lord, with this lesson to be able to honor you in this presentation. We give you thanks and praise and all that you do for each one of us. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. So, we have a map of the area we're talking about. The central is Jerusalem here, and he's traveling from Bethlehem, is where his concubine had gone home to mom and dad's. They had some kind of a spat, and the wife, concubine, had gone home, and this young man had gone down to Bethlehem to get her and win her back, and they were heading back home. That's where we are right now. Okay, verses. So starting in verse 18. He said unto him, We are passing from Bethlehem, Judea, toward the side of Mount Ephraim. From thence am I. And I went to Bethlehem, Judea, but I am now going to the house of the Lord, and there is no man that receiveth me to house. This is him actually talking to this gentleman that met him in the area near Jerusalem. That's actually in Gibeon, I believe. So I want to correct an issue from our last lesson about this particular verse. I am now going. And so he's explaining, I am now. So he's heading on his way. He says, I am now going to the house of the Lord. That confused me. The house of the Lord, we think of it as being in Jerusalem, but realize this is before it actually had moved to Jerusalem, which is during the period of David. And we're before David. And so the house of the Lord is actually still up in Shiloh. And so that's up here. So he's heading back towards that area. And he's from Mount Ephraim, which is only right over here. So he's not far from Shiloh. So the LXX, which is the Septuagint, reads, I am going to my own house, which is probably the true meaning. As we find in Judges 19:29, and when he was come into his house, he took a knife. So at the end of this journey, he ended up at his own house. He really went home, yet he might have gone previously to Shiloh or to the house of the Lord, because that was also in Mount Ephraim area. So that's what we just wanted to point that out, that I was confused by that verse in 18 about where he was heading. Okay, so picking up back up, so let's just read through to verse 22 where we left off. Yet there is both straw and provider for our asses, and there is bread and wine also for me, and for thy handmaid, and for thy young man which is with thy servants. There is no want of anything. So this is that man that's helping him out. And the old man said, Peace be with thee. Howsoever, let all thy wants lie upon me. Only lodge not in the street. He was going to lodge in the street. This old man knew that would be dangerous. Right? Reminds me of another story of Lot and the two angels that came to visit. They were going to sleep in the street also, and Lot put them up, which we're going to look at here in a minute. Verse 21. So he brought him into his house and gave provider unto the asses, and they washed their feet and did eat and drink. So this is where we left off. So on to verse 22. We'll try to pay close attention to what happens here. Now, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, I'm going to explain these words in a minute. The sons of Belial beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him. I realize that if you've done any study in the Bible, you realize that these men were homosexuals, and they wanted to actually have a sexual relationship with the man that came to town. If you remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, this is not unusual in the Bible as something that happened once before back in Genesis. In fact, in Genesis 19, so we're going to see the comparison here. A very similar situation. Before I go on, though, let's talk about these words. Make our hearts merry. That just means, typically that means that they're basically drinking, and they're getting a little intoxicated. And certain sons of Belial. Belial is actually a word that means, the meaning of this word as found in scriptures is worthlessness, or hence reckless, lawlessness. The expression son of or man of Belial must be understood as meaning simply a worthless, lawless fellow. The term is used in 2 Corinthians 6:15 also. Let's look at that for a second. And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? So the term used there is generally understood as an appellative of Satan. In other words, it's a Satan-driven individual, as the personification of all that was bad. So that when we talk about that Belial. Okay, back to our text here. So hearts merry, so they're intoxicated. These men come to the door, and they want to have a relationship with the man that came to town, the stranger. And these sons of Belial are basically hooligans that want to basically rape this man. They beset the house round about and were beating at the door, and spake to the master of the house. The old man actually went out and talked to him. Bring forth the man that came into that house, that we may know him. This sounds very, very familiar to another time in Genesis 19 that this happened. You remember the Lot and has two angels that were in the house with him. That was in Genesis 19:4 and 5. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compressed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And we may know them basically means we want to rape them. Okay, on to verse 25. And it came to pass when the hearts were merry that they said, I'm sorry. So we see here in Genesis not only homosexuality, but also in a violent manner. I'm reminded of a prophecy. It seems to be a pattern that happened not only in the Old Testament, but is predominant in our world today. This story will show us how when we refuse to follow God's ways, it leaves a void where evil steps in which has Satan's fingerprints all over it. Hearts merry, which probably means got drunk. We also saw this in verses 6 and 9. And also we see it in Judges 16:25. That's a story of Samson. Similar situation. It came to pass when their hearts were merry that they said, Call for Samson. This was that at the end there, Samson was brought out and they were making sport of him. They're making fun of him, basically. His eyes were out. They put him between those two pillars. And they're all having a good old time getting drunk. So I just wanted to point to the other places that term is used. Okay, back to our text, verse 23. And the master of the house, went out unto them, and said unto them, Nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, seeing this man is come into mine house, do not this folly. Now, this folly is actually another term very similar to being to rape. And we also see it in 2 Samuel 13:12. This is and she answered him, Nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. This was the story of Tamar, if you remember. She was the daughter of David, one of David's daughter, David the king, daughter. And she was actually raped by her brother, Ashkelon. And so a similar situation. And I just wanted to show where that particular term was used also to show a situation where rape was involved. Okay, on to verse 24. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden. So this is the old man in the house, and he's going to offer his daughter in place of the stranger. Here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. Them I will bring out now, and humble you them, and do with them what you seemeth good unto you. But unto this man do no such vile a thing. You may say to yourself, boy, he's offering these women out to them, but he's protecting the man. They got to realize this culture is very similar to this, and that it's a bad situation either way. But he's trying to appease them so that they don't do anything to the man. Very similar situation in Genesis 19:8. Behold, now I have two daughters. Which again, this is back to Lot. Same thing. Lot offered his two daughters, and they didn't want his two daughters. And so, which have not known man, let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and you do unto them as you good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore come they under the shadow of my roof. Again, this idea of the stranger being brought into the house should be protected from anything that any evil within that town. That's just good hospitality. So nowhere is the unwritten law of hospitality stronger than the Middle East. Protecting a guest at any cost ranked at the top of a man's code of honor. But here the hospitality code turned to fanatism. The rape and abuse of a daughter and a companion were preferable to the possibility of conflict between a guest and a neighbor. The two men were selfish. They didn't want to get hurt themselves. They lacked courage. They didn't want to face a conflict, even when lives were at stake. And they disobeyed God's law. They allowed deliberate abuse and murder. What drastic consequences can result when social protocols carries more authority than moral convictions. We're going to get into the whole background on this particular situation and how it got to this point. Let's continue on this story, verses 25 through 28. But the men would not hearken to him. So the man took his concubine, brought her forth unto them, and they knew her, and they abused her all the night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. Basically gang rape. Sad situation. Then came the woman in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house, where her Lord was, till it was light. And her Lord rose up in the morning, and opened the door of the house, and went out to get his way. And behold, the woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. And he said unto her, Let us be going. But none answered. And the man took her up upon his ass, and the man rose up and gate him in unto his place. Just want to add to this, Judges 20, verse 5. This is going into the future, but I want to see basically what he sees here and what he ends up doing about it. And the men of Gibeah rose up against me and beset the house. This is what he told others later on happened that night. And the men of Gibeah rose up against me and beset the house round about upon me by night, and thought to have slain me, and my concubine have they forced, that she is dead. We will see that when repeating this story, he made it sound like he had no choice, and that she was taken by force of the man who threatened to kill him. he had actually offered her out to them, and didn't even try to protect her. So back to our study here in verses 29 and 30. And when he was come into his house, he took a knife and laid hold on his concubine and divided her, together with her bones, into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coasts of Israel. He sent a piece to every tribe. And it was so that all that saw it said there was no such deed done nor seen from that day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider of it, take advice, and speak your minds. So he wants everybody in all the tribes to know what happened that night to his concubine. He's obviously upset, which he has a right to be upset. So here in verse 30, I'm going to add first, although this is a terrible way to spread the news, it effectively communicated the horror of the crime and called the people to action. Saul used a similar method in 1 Samuel 11:7, and he took a yoke of oxen and hewed them in pieces and sent them throughout all the coast of Israel by the hands of messengers, saying, Whosoever cometh not forth after Saul and after Samuel, so shall it be done unto his oxen. And the fear of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out with one consent. So in this situation, Saul was actually using a similar method. He sent a piece of a yoke of an oxen to each of the tribes and said if they didn't come to a meeting with Saul, that he was going to do that to their oxen. So ironically, the man who alerted Israel to the murder of his concubine was just as guilty, though, for her death as the men who actually killed her. Remember, he offered her. And I guess the part that I wonder about when I read that story is she laid at the door. They brought her back. Could she have been saved? Yeah, possibly. She laid out there all night long, probably bleeding and intense pain from being attacked by these men. So in that verse 30 there, I also want to add Judges 20 verse 7 to this verse. Behold, you are all children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. The horrible crime described in this chapter wasn't Israel's worst offense. Even worse was the nation's failure to establish a government based upon God's moral principles. Where the law of God was the law of the land, as a result, laws were usually not enforced and crime was ignored. Sexual perversion and lawlessness were byproducts of Israel's disobedience to God. The Israelites weren't willing to speak up until events had gone too far. Whenever we get away from God and His Word, all sorts of evil can follow. Our drifting away from God may be slow and almost imperceptible, with the ultimate result affecting a future generation. We must continually call our nation back to God and work toward the establishment of God's moral and spiritual reign in the heart of every person. So, now we're going to move into chapter 20. So the scenario is we got the entire 11 other tribes now know about the situation that happened, and they're going to come and talk to the man in chapter 20 here, and try to assess what happened and what they're going to do about it. The men that did it were a part of the tribe of Benjamin. So that as we move into chapter 20, I want you to realize that these particular people that are known as the sons of Benal were part of a tribe, Benjamin. So this is going to end up being a civil war between the rest of the tribes and Benjamin. Israel's war with Benjamin is what we call this section. We now will see the result of this heinous act perpetuated on an entire tribe, not just on those who were guilty. This is where pride is going to kick in, and when you don't have a good legal system to be able to take care of things like this, back to our text verse, we'll read here in a minute, which is Judges 21:25. Every man, without a king in Israel, every man did as what was right in his own mind. And that's a dangerous place to be. Okay, so let's go on to chapter 20, verse 1. Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man, from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead, unto the Lord in Mizpah. It's just a term meaning one similar to like we do when you say like from the East Coast to the West Coast, or we might say from L.A. to Washington. It's a way of describing the entire country. And that's what that term means when it says from Dan to Beersheba. Remember, Dan is all the way up in the north. Remember, Dan was way up here in the north. There's Dan over there, and then Beersheba is all the way in the south. So it's down here somewhere. I don't know if this map has it on it. It's right down here. It's actually, I think, even a little bit south of here. I don't see it right this minute. As far as I don't have it on here. I didn't look for it earlier. But it's down here. And oh, there it is, right there. Beersheba. I don't know if you can read it. There it is. Okay, back to our text. And also looking at 1 Samuel 7:5. And Samuel said, gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray for you unto the Lord. So it's a very similar, so that whenever there was need to be, all the tribes needed to gather together, they got together at Mizpah. That's all that's talking about. So Dan was the northernmost city in Israel, and Beersheba the southmost. The two were often mentioned together as a reference to the entire nation. It's kind of like saying from L.A. to New York, a figure of speech for the whole country. So continuing on, verses 2 through 5. And the chief of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in an assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen that drew sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel were gone to Mizpah. Then said the children of Israel, tell us, how was this wickedness? And the Levite, the husband of the woman that was slain, answered and said, I came into Gibeah, going back to our area, came into Gibeah, which is right there. That belongeth to Benjamin, and actually, is that Gibeah? Benjamin is right here. That says Gibeon. I'm not sure if they're the same. Now that I think about it. I think it is. Unless someone else sees a Gibeah there somewhere. Anyway, I know it's in this area. This is the area of Benjamin. Benjamin includes Jerusalem. That's this general area. And Levite, the husband of a woman that was slain, answered and said, I came into Gibeah that belongeth to Benjamin, and I and my concubine to lodge. And the men of Gibeon rose up against me, and beset the house round about upon me by night, and thought to have slain me. Now they never threatened to kill him. So there's already one stretch of the truth. And my concubine have they forced that she is dead. That term, they have forced, means that she was raped. So she is dead from being raped. Some other verses on this. Let's look, again, going back to 1922. I wanted to, we already read this pair, but this is where it actually talks about what really did happen as we started out today. So let's kind of look at these two. Now as they were making their hearts merry, so they're drunk, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, okay, that part is true, and beat at the door, okay, and spake to the master of the house. Now the master of the house even went out there and talked to him. The old man saying, bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him. I'm going to jump to verses 25 and 26. But the men would not hearken to him, that's the old man. So the man took his concubine, brought her forth unto them, and they knew her, and abused her all night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. She was still alive when she left them. Now, of course, we know that she dies, but we don't really know what caused her death either. Then came the woman in the dawn of the day and fell down at the door of the man's house, where her Lord was, till it was light. So she's there laying at the door. I don't know if she tried to knock on the door or if they just ignored him. These guys were getting drunk, so maybe they didn't even hear her. So kind of definitely misleading as to the events. Just enough truth to make it persuasive. So in reporting the events to Gibeah, the man conveniently left out the fact that he had handed over his concubine to satisfy the mob's demands. He wanted justice for the threats made against himself, rather than placing any value on the life of the woman or holding himself partly responsible for her death. How easy it is to give only partial facts or twist events to remove our own culpability, and we are seeking to shift blame to someone else. This incident reveals the depth of perversion and violence that developed when a culture abandons God's ways. That's true. Over the last 5 years or so, I can't help but think about the fact that we seem to be heading in a similar situation, where if you're somebody of the world, or if you have the right kind of friends, this kind of violence is kind of overlooked. But when you're somebody who holds a special place for God in their hearts, somehow it seems like that they're persecuted heavier. So I can see us heading back into the same situation that we were in here. And when we get done with this story completely, I'm just going to comment about how I think that this whole story, to me, speaks volumes to what's that we've entered into the last days as we see events happening around the world these days. But I'll talk about that at the end. Okay, verse 6. He's continuing to tell his story. And I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they had committed lewdness and folly in Israel. Again, that word folly means vileness. Verse 7. And behold, ye are all children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. So he's come to them and asking what they suggest. And we have similar back in chapter 19, verses 29 and 30. We already know what they thought about this already. And when he was come into his house, he took a knife and laid hold on the concubine, divided her together with her bones into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coast of Israel. And it was so that all that saw it said, there was no such deed done nor seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider of it, take advice, and speak your minds. So he's setting them up to try to get revenge for what happened to his concubine. Trying to make it sound like, though, that he was also a victim. Okay, so moving to verse 8. And all the people arose as one man, saying, We will not any of us go to his tent, neither will we any of us turn into his house. So they've decided now that they're gonna do something about this. They're not gonna return to their tents, so they're gonna return to their homes. But now this shall be the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up by lot against it, and we will take 10 men of 100, so 1/10, throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000, to fetch victuals for the people. Then that they may do when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly that they had wrought in Israel. They're planning an attack. So again, it's supplies. They're getting the men needed to actually go and get these men that did this folly in Israel. Verse 11. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. In other words, they're all of one accord. They all had a one-track mind in this situation. And the tribe of Israel sent men throughout all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, What wickedness is this that is done among you? So just bring in another verse here, Deuteronomy 13, verses 14 and 15. I want to make a comment about this particular part as a parallel. Because what they're doing is not wrong. So in Deuteronomy 14 and 15, then shalt thou inquire and make search, and ask diligently, and behold, if it be truth, and the thing certain, that such abomination is wrong among you, then thou shalt surely smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroying it utterly, and all that is therein, and the cattle thereof with the edge of the sword. So the basic rule was that you first investigate. You go and investigate and see if it was true. If it was true, then the men of that city should be destroyed for this particular vile act. So based on Deuteronomy and what the man said, it was justified what they were doing. I see the main problem is in who was punished. We will see shortly. Back to our text, verse 13. Now therefore deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and put away evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. So they're going to protect these men, even though they had done wrong. And this is when you have lawlessness. Sometimes based on the information, these men were right in what they were doing, but that the men of Benjamin thought they were wrong in what they were doing. No different than any other civil war. Usually you have it within one country. You have a group of people who agree with the situation and another group of people who disagree with the situation. Look at our own civil war back about slavery. Very similar situation when it came to the South wanted to keep their slaves and the North wanted to free them. So similar situation when it comes to civil war. One of the verses on this, verses 13 in 1 Corinthians 5:13. But them that are without God judgeth, therefore put away from among yourselves that wicked person. So in other words, when you have godliness in a situation, that you're not judging with God, then most likely then you therefore put away from among yourselves that wicked person. So if the person is ungodly, they should be put away. So perhaps the leaders of the tribe of Benjamin had been given distorted facts about the serious crime in their territory, or perhaps they were too proud to admit that some of their people had stooped so low. In either case, they would not listen to the rest of Israel and hand over the accused criminals. They were more loyal to their own tribe than to God's law. By covering for their kinsmen, the entire tribe of Benjamin sank to a level of immortality as low as that of the criminals. Through this act, we get a glimpse of how thoroughly the nation's moral fabric had unraveled. The time period of the judges ends in a bloody civil war that sets the stage for a spiritual renewal to come up under Samuel. So when we get into Samuel, you're going to see how this all plays out. And that the nation of Israel is just in a very sad situation. Okay, finishing up our text for today, verses 14 through 16. But the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities in the Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel. And the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men. They drew sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. Among all the people there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Every one could sling stones at a hairbreadth and not miss. Those are the people that were actually in Benjamin. I'll talk about that left-handed here for just a little side note on that here in a minute. Because it also mentions about being left-handed in Judges 3:15. You remember that first judge. But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. There's a Benjamite that was left-handed too. Interestingly, that being good with your left hand was noted here and earlier. So 700 left-handed slingers. The number may reflect a special or elite contingent of ambidextrous warriors. Based on that, we've seen that Benjamin seems to strive in that area. They taught their people to be able to use either hand, who were such a marksman with their slings that they could turn the odds for an outnumbered army. If we go to First Chronicles 12:22, we see another group that was outnumbered. They were armed with bows and could use both the right hand and the left in hurling stones and shooting arrows out of a bow, even of Saul's brethren of the Benjamins. So it seems to be a trait of the Benjamites. Left-handed. So in another commentary I read, it talks about it could be that they were left-handed because they had for some reason their right hand was damaged or injured in some way. Could be, but it could be that just that they were ambidextrous, and so that it's an advantage to be able to shoot with either arm, either hand, because if you lose one, you can always use the other. But it's also stated they may have been these left-handed slingers may have been given that job because most people that fought with their right hands, so they were strong with their right hands. So typically sword play and things of that nature were done with the right hand. So because these men maybe could not use their right hand, that they were turned into slingers because they needed to use their left hand, or they were just ambidextrous. The sling was a very ancient warlike instrument, and in the hands of those who were skilled in the use of it, producing astonishing effects. The inhabitants of Israel, the islands of there was actually a tribe in the Isle of Belize. They actually used to play a game to teach children how to use slings. And they would play this game where they had put a piece of bread up on top of a pole, and they weren't allowed to eat the bread, their bread, until they actually knocked the bread off the pole from some distance. And then basically, through that kind of training, they were actually be able to hit an object from 600 feet away. We of course remember the story of David and Goliath, and how he learned that because of a shepherd to ward off animals like lions and bears and foxes from touching the sheep. He got really good at a slingshot. Very similar thing. And so we saw that in 1 Samuel 17:40. And he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in the shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Then jump into verses 49 and 50. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slung it, smote the Philistine in the forehead, that the stone stuck in his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. And so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Everybody says, well, how come he picked up 5 stones? Maybe he wasn't very confident. No, actually, Goliath had 4 brothers, and so David was ready to take on all 5. Okay, so finish up verse 17. And the men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men. They drew sword, and all these were men of war. So tomorrow we will see how this civil war will play out. The biggest moral of this story is, again, the theme of this book, Judges 21:25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So when you take God out of the picture, allowing evil to take his place, 100% of the time ends in destruction. And I'm afraid that our country might be heading in that same direction. So, dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for this lesson. And thank you, Lord, for helping us to see that that we need you. We need you so badly in this country and in our world, and we need you to be our guiding force and your morals and your commandments. That we need to follow them and be a society that has rules. And we give you praise and thanks and all you teach us. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. Okay, tomorrow we'll take a look at this war, a civil war, and how it plays out.